next candidate, ladies and gentlemen, is Mark Meadows.
In doing that, as we look at those particular economic conditions, if you boil it down, Keynesian economics really is looking to the government for answers and the government stimulus. Supply side economics comes in where it is actually looking at the private sector being able to produce goods and services cheap enough to create a demand. Now, the problem with John Maynard Keynes was that he was a socialist and he was a government worker, never worked in the private sector, and so as you see that, his mindset was one that the government was the answer. I don't agree with that. I believe that supply side economics is really what we're looking at, and if you look throughout history, what we see is that indeed supply side economics works and Keynesian economics does not. Margaret Thatcher was pressured many years ago to go in and try to instill that type of economic role. And she said, the problem with that Keynesian economics is eventually you run out of other people's money. And in doing that, we're postponing the inevitable. And so as we look at this, he came up with this theory back in the 1930s, in the middle of the Great Depression. And as we see this, Franklin Roosevelt said, if we just spend more money, we will be able to spend our way out of a depression. And yet, even Roosevelt's Secretary of Treasury, after 8 years of spending money, and I quote, says, what we've done is we've spent more money, we've truly invested more trying to create jobs, and it doesn't work. Now, this was Roosevelt's Secretary of Treasury. And so as we look at that, it took 20 years to come out of the Great Depression by looking at government as the answer. And so where do we come back on this? Well, we look at supply side, and we see that inevitably it works. We see it with Ronald Reagan. We see it with the UK and Great Britain under Margaret Thatcher. We also see it back with a Democrat under JFK. When you start to see, when you limit the role of government, you reduce taxes, you reduce spending, the economy thrives. In closing, here's what I would look at. We see that it didn't work under Nixon when he tried Keynesian. It didn't work under FDR. It didn't work under Eisenhower. It didn't work under Bush, and it's not working under Obama. There is not a good characteristic of where it ever worked. The only thing that can be said about it is that it's bipartisan. It fails regardless of which party is in office. What happens is it ends up paying for just about everything. You know, we don't believe that we're entitled to car insurance. We don't believe that we're entitled to life insurance. And so as we look at that, it's about spreading the risk. Here's what we need to make sure of, is that as we have to have some skin in the game. Everybody does. And when we provide health care coverage for everyone, what it normally means is we're not as personally responsible.
Okay, you talked about Keynesian economics a little bit, and a great part of that policy depends upon whether it's monetary policy or fiscal policy and so forth. But one of the biggest problems with stimulating the economy is the vast and expanding body of regulations that's growing now.
Sure.
Which ones do you think are the most onerous? What would you do to try to reduce the number of regulations so the business could operate in a freer method?
Okay. You know, specifically as we're looking at regulation, there are a number of areas. Part of our jobs plan is to reduce regulation by 20%. I see that single factor as being, economists will say that with each 5% reduction in regulation, we create 1.2 million jobs. So we call for a 20% reduction in regulation that would create almost 4.8 million jobs just in doing that. But here's where we go with that, is as we look at regulation, there's a direct correlation with the economy. Jimmy Carter many years ago said that, you know, our best days were behind us. And some of you, as I look out there, will remember gas lines. You know, if you remember gas lines, you know, on your even tag, you got to go on even days. On your odd tag, you got to go on odd days. And as you saw that, Ronald Reagan came in and said that's phooey. He took the Federal Registry, which is really where the federal regulations come from 87,000 pages to 47,000 pages.